When billionaire Michael Stone stepped into a modest diner on Chicago's outskirts, he sought nothing more than a peaceful meal. But within moments, masked intruders burst through the door, demanding cash and spreading terror among the patrons. Amid the chaos, a young waitress named Sarah Evans remained unshaken, her voice steady, her hands calm, as if fear held no sway over her. Michael observed in astonishment, unaware that her composure would spark a decision in him that would stun the world. Before we dive in, please like this video and share where you're watching from in the comments. Your support fuels more inspiring stories like this one. Now, let's begin. The diner's lights glowed softly against its polished chrome counters as night deepened outside. Michael Stone, a billionaire, sat quietly in a corner booth, dressed in a simple suit that concealed his wealth. He craved a break from relentless boardroom meetings, private flights, and towering glass offices that distanced him from everyday life. For one evening, he wanted the solace of silence, the taste of authentic coffee, and the chance to observe lives far removed from his own. He had no inkling that this quiet night would become a turning point. The bell above the door jangled sharply. 3 men stormed in, their faces obscured by black masks, their voices rough with menace. One brandished a pistol, waving it erratically, while another pounded the cash register with his fist. Fear swept through the diner instantly. Dishes clattered, drinks spilled, and patrons froze, as if the air itself had turned solid. Michael's keen eyes took in the scene, but his focus shifted not to the threatening intruders, but to the young waitress who had served him, moments earlier with a gentle smile. Her name was Sarah Evans, no older than 23, with weary eyes that held quiet resilience. While others screamed, gasped, or ducked under tables, Sarah's reaction was unexpected. She didn't tremble. She didn't weep. Her breathing stayed even, and her voice, though soft, pierced the chaos with an uncanny calm. "Please, take what you need," she said, her hands raised to show compliance as she gently guided terrified customers toward safety. The robbers shouted at her, weapons raised, yet her poise never faltered. Every movement was deliberate, almost protective, as if her calm could shield others from their fear. Michael's pulse quickened in a way it hadn't in years. He had sealed billion-dollar deals, faced cutthroat rivals, and outmaneuvered hostile boards. But he had never witnessed courage like this. It wasn't loud or aggressive. It was quiet, unyielding bravery from a young woman who could have fled or hidden like the rest. Instead, she stood as a barrier between chaos and innocence. One of the masked men slammed his gun against the counter, demanding money. The cashier fumbled, hands shaking, nearly dropping the bills. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady as she murmured to the panicked cashier, "It's okay. Hand it over. Stay calm." Her words eased the tension, and even Michael noticed the cashier's hands steady slightly. The robbers swore and stuffed the cash into a bag as the air grew thick with tension. Yet Sarah's gaze never wavered. For a fleeting moment, her eyes locked with the leader's, and Michael saw something profound in that look. Not defiance, not fear, but an unspoken resolve to hold on to her dignity despite the danger. Michael's fists tightened under the table. His instincts urged him to act, but he knew reckless moves could endanger lives. Instead, he watched her closely, noting every detail of her composure, every word she spoke with quiet strength. He realized her courage stemmed not from wealth, power, or privilege, but from something deeper, something no amount of money could purchase. When the robbers finally fled, the silence that followed was deafening. Patrons emerged from hiding, some trembling, others weeping, clutching one another. Michael exhaled slowly, his mind fixed on the waitress, who now helped an elderly couple back to their seats, her voice soothing, her hands steady. She even knelt to pick up a shattered glass, as if to signal that life could resume. In that moment, Michael knew he couldn't simply leave this night behind. What he had seen was more than courage. It was a reminder that true strength can emerge in the most unlikely places, even in a humble diner during a robbery. As he watched Sarah Evans smooth her apron with quiet grace, he felt the stirrings of a decision that would not only transform her life, but ripple across the world. And this was just the beginning. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, but inside the diner, the air remained heavy with the aftermath of fear. Most customers grabbed their belongings and hurried out, as if fleeing the memory of terror. Michael Stone, however, stayed seated, his sharp gaze locked on Sarah Evans, the waitress who had turned panic into fragile calm. She moved with purpose, checking on each person, pouring water for trembling hands, and speaking in a voice so steady it felt like a refuge. Michael's world was filled with people who saw him as a means to an end: investors, politicians, partners, strangers chasing his wealth. But Sarah was different. She had risked herself for others without hesitation, expecting nothing in return. He watched as she comforted a frightened child, kneeling to meet their eyes, her smile warm despite her visible exhaustion. In that moment, Michael felt something his billions had never given him: genuine admiration. When the police arrived, Sarah gave her statement with precision, her memory sharp despite the chaos. Officers remarked on her composure, but she deflected their praise with humility. Michael stood from his booth and approached her as the crowd thinned. He offered his hand, his voice calm but weighted with meaning she couldn't yet grasp. "You kept everyone safe tonight. That's extraordinary." Sarah gave a faint smile, wiping her hands on her apron before shaking his. "I just did what needed doing," she said, her honesty striking. Michael studied her closely, noting the calluses on her fingers from long hours of work, the fatigue in her eyes that no coffee could erase. She wasn't someone handed life's luxuries. She fought for every step. He wanted to ask her countless questions, but she excused herself to clear broken glass from the floor, careful to protect others from harm. The diner's owner muttered a brief "thanks," but Michael saw that her efforts went largely unnoticed, as if such bravery was expected rather than celebrated. That realization hit him hard. Outside, the city buzzed with noise, police lights fading as order returned. Michael stepped into the night air, but his thoughts lingered inside the diner. The world would read about a robbery in tomorrow's papers, with headlines focused on crime and police response. But Michael knew the true story was the young woman inside. He felt an undeniable truth pressing within him. She deserved more than a life of struggle. As his driver pulled up in a sleek black car, his assistant called, reminding him of a high-stakes meeting the next morning with executives nationwide. Normally, he'd focus on the millions at play, but tonight his mind was far from corporate deals. He was haunted by the image of a waitress standing fearless amid danger. Sleep eluded him. From his penthouse window, Michael gazed at the Chicago skyline, replaying the night's events. He had built an empire on strategy, risk, and ambition, but what he'd seen was a different kind of strength. Sarah Evans had no wealth or influence, yet she had commanded a room of terror with her calm. Michael knew such courage couldn't remain hidden in a diner forever. A decision took root within him, resolute and unshakable. He wouldn't let her bravery fade into obscurity. He would act, not as a billionaire seeking acclaim, but as a man who recognized true strength. The world had overlooked her, but he would not. He would create a moment so powerful, so unexpected, that Sarah's courage would resonate far beyond the diner's walls. Michael turned from the window, his reflection steady with resolve. For the first time in years, he felt his wealth could serve a purpose beyond profit. He knew exactly what he needed to do, and when the world saw it, everything would change. This was only the start of his plan. The next morning, Chicago carried on as if the robbery had never happened. Newspapers buried the story in a small column amid politics and sports. No one mentioned the young woman who had calmed strangers in the face of danger. But Michael Stone couldn't forget. He sat at the head of a polished conference table in his skyscraper office, surrounded by executives discussing mergers and financial projections. Their voices droned, but Michael's mind was elsewhere, fixed on Sarah Evans's steady gaze, her calm words, her selfless bravery. When an executive asked his opinion on a billion-dollar deal, his silence stunned the room. He set down his pen, his expression firm. "I want to shift priorities," he said. Confusion spread, but he did not explain. His wealth had always built more wealth today. He wanted it to build something greater. He dismissed the meeting, leaving puzzled faces behind, and instructed his driver to return to the diner. The familiar bell chimed as he entered. The aroma of coffee and bacon filled the air, and customers chatted as if the previous night's terror had vanished. Sarah was there, moving between tables with her quiet grace, her smile soft, but her eyes betraying exhaustion. Michael watched her wipe down a table, refill cups, and comfort an elderly man who dropped his fork. She treated every person with care, as if they mattered more than herself. He called her over. She hesitated, recognizing him from the robbery. "Are you okay?" she asked, setting a menu before him with kindness. He shook his head slightly, struck by her concern for him. "Sarah, I need to talk about last night." She stiffened, gripping the table's edge, briefly thinking he might be with the police. His next words caught her off guard. "You showed a courage I haven't seen in decades. You saved people without even realizing it." Sarah looked away, embarrassed, brushing hair from her face. "I just did what anyone would," she said softly. Michael leaned forward, his voice intense yet steady. "No, most people ran. You stayed. That makes you rare." She had no response, pulled back to her shift, but his words lingered. Later, as she counted meager tips barely covering her rent, she wondered why a man like him had noticed her. She didn't know he was one of America's wealthiest men, just a sharply dressed stranger with piercing eyes. Michael, however, knew his next move. He instructed his assistant to prepare something unprecedented, not a press release, but a moment that would reveal Sarah's strength to the world. For years, he had stunned competitors with bold strategies and acquisitions. Now, he was about to stun the world with something far greater, a tribute to a waitress whose courage deserved recognition. As the day ended, Michael stood at his penthouse window, the city aglow below. He recalled his late father's words, "Real wealth is measured not by what you keep, but by what you give." For the first time, he understood. This wasn't charity, it was recognition, a chance to prove that true courage deserves a stage beyond a small diner. When his plan unfolded, the world would have to take notice. 2 weeks later, the diner appeared unchanged from the outside, but something monumental was about to happen within. Sarah Evans worked double shifts, her apron frayed, her shoes worn thin, yet her spirit remained strong. She hadn't thought much of Michael Stone since that night, a kind stranger who noticed her calm. But Michael hadn't forgotten. Every day since, he'd been crafting a plan so bold it would transform Sarah's life and capture global attention. That morning, Sarah arrived at dawn expecting a typical day. But the sight before her stopped her cold. News vans lined the street, cameras and microphones crowding the sidewalk. Inside, customers whispered, glancing toward the corner booth where Michael sat, his presence commanding yet understated. Sarah's heart raced. She approached cautiously, unsure why the world's attention was on her workplace. Michael stood as if the moment had been planned, though his actions stemmed from conviction, not theatrics. Reporters turned their cameras on him. He gestured toward Sarah, his voice clear and resonant. 2 weeks ago, I saw something that humbled me more than any boardroom or prophet ever could. In this diner, amid fear, one young woman stood calm. She protected others not with wealth or power, but with the rarest courage, the courage to remain steady when others couldn't. Sarah's cheeks burned as all eyes turned to her. She wanted to shrink back, but Michael pressed on. This world celebrates wealth and fame, but often ignores the quiet heroes who hold it together. Sarah Evans is one of those heroes. Today, I'll ensure her courage is never forgotten. Gasps echoed through the diner as Michael revealed his plan, a multi-million-dollar foundation in Sarah's name, dedicated to supporting everyday workers who show extraordinary bravery. Cameras flashed, microphones surged forward, and the news spread instantly across networks and social media. Headlines wouldn't to focus on a billionaire's wealth or deals. They tell of a waitress whose strength inspired a man of limitless means to redefine heroism. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as Michael handed her documents, his gaze unwavering. This isn't charity, it's recognition. The world deserves to know your name, Sarah. Her hands shook as she took them, realizing they represented more than money, a legacy built on her courage. Reporters captured her stunned expression, and customers clapped, some weeping, overwhelmed by the moment. Michael placed a hand on her shoulder, his final words echoing across the nation. The world doesn't change through wealth alone. It changes through courage. And today, the world will remember yours. Within hours, the story went viral. News anchors replayed the footage, and social media buzzed with Sarah's image, her calm during the robbery, juxtaposed with Michael's announcement. Across America, people shared stories of everyday courage, inspired by a waitress who thought her life was unseen. Michael Stone had shocked the world not with another deal, but with a decision to honor someone who had only her strength to give. Sarah Evans had started her shift expecting to carry trays and clear tables. Instead, she walked out carrying the weight of a global movement. And the world would never forget the night a billionaire saw courage in a waitress and chose to make it unforgettable.